The lack of identity is unfortunately putting what may be a new idea that may bring more people into the marketplace and allow people to trade who otherwise wouldn't have the resources to engage in a trade. But all of that is shrouded by this cloud of the fact that the lack of identity is going to attract literally a lot of people who have bad intentions.
Great. So this is a full panel. We have a geek, we have a governor, we have a general, and we have an entrepreneur. So the topic is actually about the future of cybersecurity. And the reason we talk about cybersecurity is because, you know, this conference being blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, cybersecurity is important since for blockchain and cryptocurrencies, everything is by the private key. So would any of you like to start, you know, what do you think are the challenges of cybersecurity when it comes to this industry here?
Neither side understands each other. And if I could explain it from the government side, please remember that the Securities and Exchange Commission began in 1934. And it began as a result of money that was frittered away in a lot of reckless schemes contributing to the stock market crash in 1929. So there's always been a sense that the public needs protection, particularly from financial arrangements, that from the government's point of view does not have all the cards, is not equipped to really understand every investment opportunity or whether or not it's cogent. On the other end, you have the sense of invention. And for thousands of years, women and men have taken first steps down new roads, sometimes are armed with nothing but their own vision. And historically, every new invention was opposed and every new idea was denounced. But our history is that many of those who believed in something went ahead anyway. They fought and they suffered, but they won. And this is why, technologically, our society is advanced. And we certainly want to support that. But sometimes that aim and what the aim of government clash. And I think that's probably what we're here to talk about.
You know, on the one hand, people say, you know, Bitcoin, for example, is secure, and it is. Nobody's broken the encryption, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, it's fairly obvious that it has been wildly insecure. The number of thefts, stolen coins, lost coins, is frightening. And I think that will change. I think it has to change. I think the era of, you know, ending up trading billions of dollars worth of coins on software that somebody slapped together in Perl was never a good idea, and it won't ever be a good idea again. But we have to think about cybersecurity in a holistic manner. So it isn't just about the encryption of the blockchain technology itself. It's all of the elements of security, which includes social phishing and all the areas where people may have their money stolen, which is incredibly bad for the whole industry. And I feel optimistic that in a few years' time these problems will begin to be resolved, but it's still, in my view, I don't think anybody in the room would bet against over the next 12 months, will there be a theft, a major cryptocurrency theft of at least $10 million? I bet there will be. And until you can get to a stage where that doesn't happen, it's a problem.
Well, now we have, of course, the internet, where everyone is interconnected, and all the great benefits that accrue to global society by virtue of being interconnected on a mass basis. And if you look statistically at the growth of the internet all over the world, so now we have hundreds of millions of people conducting billions and billions of innocent transactions every day, but all mixed up among them are nefarious people, whether nation states or non-nation states, conducting nefarious activities. Because of that, all these privacy and civil liberties issues, and how does one achieve, I say one, whether on an individual basis or institutional basis or a nation state basis, how does one achieve equanimity between those two poles of civil liberties and privacy on one hand and keeping a nation safe and secure on the other?
Actually, right now, the problem is most of, like, for example, like crypto exchange is not, mostly non-regulated. That means it's not a financial institution, something like that. Most of the problem comes from like a hacker attacking and then getting the crypto. That kind of situation happens a lot. So that means the customers, like retail traders or whatever, they don't believe that their asset is not secure. So we need to prove we need a kind of a technology to protect customer asset, and also we need a regulation for the crypto side is going into regulated market. That is the two things we have to think about. Yeah.
Regulation is great for many other aspects of the world, for running businesses and so on. But on the point about cybersecurity and prevention of theft, do you think regulation helps, or what are your thoughts?
I do think there's a case to be made for regulation. There have been always regulatory mechanisms in the past. In our case, in the United States, a lot of these came about as a result of abuses leading up to the Great Depression and bank collapses and all this sort of thing. And if people always behaved with altruistic motivations, then there wouldn't be any need for regulation. But invariably, if there's an opportunity to illicitly profit from something, people are out there who are going to take advantage of that.
Mandating cybersecurity, of course, is quite tricky. However, the idea that, you know, I think for any serious bank, you can imagine if a bank, an ordinary traditional bank, decided that instead of having a very complicated safe for keeping the cash, they'd just put a simple $4 padlock on the front door. Well, they would be in a lot of trouble. When their money was stolen, they would be responsible for their negligence. And that's also a form of regulation. But one of the challenges in the cryptocurrency world is that by its fundamental nature, it's incredibly global. And major exchanges are not necessarily in jurisdictions that have a strong tradition of safe and secure banking. They operate somehow outside that system.
There's a huge difference between cryptocurrencies and a traditional asset class like real estate. You can't, you know, thieves cannot go and steal a home. They can burglarize it, they can steal things inside the home, but they can't steal the home. And the reason is because real estate, ultimately the ownership is tied to identity. It's registered title to someone's name. And the reason cyber thieves go after Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is because it's anonymous. Once you steal it, no one knows that you stole it, and you can then resell it on an exchange in a different country and cash out, so to speak. So what are your thoughts on the so-called lack of identity when it comes to cryptocurrencies and the subsequent theft and the sort of people wanting to steal it?
Well, I think the market will determine that as well. But certainly the lack of identity is unfortunately putting what may be a new idea that may bring more people into the marketplace and allow people to trade who otherwise wouldn't have the resources to engage in a trade. But all of that is shrouded by this cloud of the fact that the lack of identity is going to attract literally a lot of people who have bad intentions.
But the question is, what are the techniques, what are the solutions? Is it artificial intelligence? Is it better, you know, more security guards, more bodies around the data center? Or is it some magic? What do you guys think?
You know, we've seen in a couple of cases where I think it was Tether had a theft, and because it's sufficiently centralized in its control, for better or worse, whatever you think about Tether, they were able to just mark those coins as dead and do it implicitly a fork. But the ability to have mechanisms for reversibility or for tagging, for pausing transactions, things like this, so that if someone has a theft, they raise the alarm, You can stop it in the system on the blockchain. Obviously, Bitcoin is not well designed for that, but a future approach might be a more sophisticated look at replicating the normal kinds of payment mechanisms.
So that's a great comment about recourse and no recourse. Do you think the solution is to have it less decentralized? Do we come back to the debate about should cryptocurrencies continue on its path of being fully decentralized, or should we pull back and make it more centralized to account for, to have the recourse ability to pull back thefts?
I think on something like that, I think the market will decide. In the long run, I think that if there are alternative altcoins that provide features like recourse that enough people find useful, and if they require, in order to have that, a certain degree of centralization with trusted institutional human mechanisms, and if that is sufficiently trustworthy for people, it very likely could outcompete. But I don't think there's any way to a priori say should or should not, because obviously there's disadvantages as well.
With all the cybersecurity risks of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and all the uncertainties about how blockchain can be used in real-world activities, what's your outlook on cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies? Any final words?
Personally, I think it's a super interesting area and too early to say. I haven't seen anything that will suggest that we're on the verge of seeing mass consumer adoption of cryptocurrencies. There's still too many problems. On the other hand, I'm not willing to make a bet on what the world looks like in 20 years' time.
Many of the adjustments that were made in what would now be the establishment sort of financial markets will probably be made, and that'll probably be dictated by the, by the marketplace. This isn't the first time there was a problem in this country with finance, going back to the days of John Dillinger and Jesse James. So they kind of got that worked out pretty much, and maybe they'll do it here as well.
I do think there are tremendous national security implications or potential for blockchain technology that really haven't been exploited yet.
Right now, it's like ICO is something a kind of looks like most of the IPO is going to, but it's a little bit different. But it's investing and trading is very similar with the current financial market. So I think it's in the future. There should be, right now there's a lot of talking about security tokens, and then that can be traded in the regulated market in the future, and maybe there is no more brokerage. That kind of thing can happen in the future, I think.
Great. Let's give a big round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.